Welcome everybody. I'm Sam Chanoski. I am currently the Director of Intelligence for the Electricity ISAC, the security folks for the North American electric industry. Prior to that, I worked for NERC, which I'm still a NERC employee. That's where the ISAC is. And in that job, that's really what we're talking about today. I carried over some of the responsibilities, frankly, for some of the fun stuff, some of the tools, the engineering, where I get to use some of those power engineering things and some of the visualization techniques and really get to geek out on some really interesting problems that we're working on. So that's the perspective from this. So, there we go. Good. Okay, but when I do, this is where the human element comes in, because when I do this, he knows that I want to advance the slide, so he does it. And that's the importance, the human and machine integration. That's a thing, and really, you're gonna see this theme come up in this presentation. So I didn't plan this, honest. Anyways, NERC is the quasi-governmental regulatory authority that governs the bulk electric system in North America. A lot of words there, but that means kind of we're the traffic cop. We have the mandatory reliability standards, including critical infrastructure protection standards for security. And after all the process that goes through it with the compliance, the auditing for violations, can levy fines up to $1.3 million per violation per day. And this title right here, why does NERC need situational awareness? Why does the regulator need to know what's going on the grid in not real time down to the millisecond and sub-cycle timeframes, but current time, this hour, this day sort of thing? If I'm a utility, that's the last thing I would ever want, right? That's kind of what I thought when I did work for utilities. But there's some good reasons for this. And really what it comes down to is having a shared and accurate understanding of the real conditions on the interconnected electric systems benefits everybody. And of course, the first part, it's law, actually. The Federal Power Act, as amended, Section 215. One of the things that NERC is legislatively required to do and delegated to do is to maintain situational awareness of conditions on the grid and conduct periodic assessments of the reliability of the system. Well, situational awareness is a periodic assessment of the reliability of the system. It's just in a real short time window. So this 15 minutes, and then I'm going to do it again 15 minutes later, and so on. That's really the tack we took until we got that word situational awareness actually into the legislation. But practically, we're the eyes and ears of the ERO enterprise, which is NERC and the 6 regional entities that are closer down and more direct contact with the utilities. And I have there the quote, an informed regulator. The whole quote that I didn't really want to put on the slides is, an uninformed regulator is your worst nightmare. If you have a regulator that has the authority to go out and set standards that are mandatory and enforceable with financial penalties behind them, you really want those to be the right standards, looking at the right things, and they're measured justly and consistently. Not something that, well, I think this is a problem, so we should write a standard about it. And there's a lot of checks and balances, so it probably wouldn't come to pass, but you'd waste a lot of time along the way. We want to use the right interventions in the right way. Not everything is appropriate for a standard, and NERC does things other than standards, a lot of technical guidelines for system planning, for transmission and generation operations, frequency response, a lot of different technical topics. And being the eyes and ears for the regulator helps us draw those out too, to understand the problem. I think Einstein said something like, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 50 minutes understanding what it really is I'm trying to do. Nicole talked a lot about that in her presentation as well, that really having these eyes and ears to perceive what's going on and where we can send the right people to dig more deeply into particular issues, that's really NERC's need for situational awareness. This idea of detecting faint signals, the electric grid, the 4 interconnections across North America, we also have Quebec in our jurisdiction as well. It's huge. Largest machine on earth, people have called it. The amount of data that's produced every single minute on it almost confounds my understanding a lot of times. But being able to pick out where we can, being able to look in the right places in the right ways to see, oh, this is something interesting, let me dig into that. If we had the resources to scale up, who knows what we'd be able to find. But this is what we have right now. And the last thing about situational awareness is it creates that cognitive bridge between after the fact event analysis, where you're doing that good root cause investigation into something that happened that you didn't want to have happen, and you're identifying all the different links in that chain that had to come together at the same point in time and space, so you can design effective barriers against each link to have a better chance of better outcomes in the future. It creates the gap between that retroactivity, and in the future, reliability assessments. Our group that's looking, what does 10 years out look like? What does the fuel mix look like? Things that Rick was touching on. What new technologies are we going to have to understand and deal with that are driving the behaviors of the system? And what can we learn from what we've seen today to do better in the future to get them in right with fewer errors and better chances of success? So for this, in 2010, we started the work for it, and it came online in the fall of 2012, a tool called SAFNR version 2. That's an acronym for Situation Awareness for NERC, FERC, and the regions, and also the reliability coordinators. They didn't get an extra R, but those are the 4 groups of different organizations that have access to this tool. This was the version that we ran with for about 6 years. As you can see, if you're familiar with it, it's Power World based. Not a whole lot particularly novel from a technological perspective about this, but what was different is we had real-time data coming in SCADA time frames, so updated every 6 to 15 seconds, for all the 200 kV facilities and above for transmission in the United States and 500 megawatt and above units. So I could see that from my desk, logging onto the tool, getting access, and having that understanding that I could drill down to. That should give me pretty good situational awareness, right? Plus, I've got a green and red heat map type thing that I could put up on the slide so the executives can see it, and that'll just look awesome. That really gets people right there. But when I needed to figure something out, I had about 18 other tabs that I had to open to go into other tools, commercial sources, some things that we built in-house, different for-pay tools that the electricity industry uses, like some of the OATI applications like the Interchange Distribution Calculator, weather, space weather, terrestrial weather, Twitter. Twitter is huge. People think they're going to hide something from the regulator. If you have a significant disturbance in your system that impacts customers, what do? You let your customers know. Guess what? I can see that too. And I'm not out to say, you violated something. I'm out to understand it, because the first thing I want to have happen is get the system put back into a stable state safely and efficiently. And if I can provide a little bit of top cover to my CEO and to the Department of Energy and to FERC by having that understanding, saying, hey, here's what happened, here's what we know, and we're going to get some more information, but this is the situation, you understand it, that tends to put people at ease. And the last thing we want them to have to do is pick up a phone and call a control room, this has happened in the past before, to an electric company that is preoccupied with things that need to be a lot higher and occupying 100% of their cognitive attention, not answering questions from a regulatory authority at that moment in time. That's the time for the after the fact event analyses to come in. And Google, of course, and putting it all together into some kind of document, some record that I have right there. It is an inherently human process, but you can see there's probably a lot of opportunity there that we can automate things to make it a little easier to take these disparate things together to make it better, faster, more effective. Take all that, and even if we had perfect homeostasis in the industry and we didn't have the changing fuel mix, we didn't have increasing penetration of distributed energy resources, we didn't have more inverter-based resources than we really understood what to do with today, we didn't have supply chain concerns, we didn't have cybersecurity concerns, we'd still need to do all this. We would still need to improve our ability at situational awareness. But on top of this, we have all this change happening in all these different dimensions across the grid that is changing day over day, week over week, how it behaves, what we're able to perceive, and probably the one that's most interesting to me is what those perceptions actually mean. So that when I take it in, I understand it, and I compare it to what I know, my experience, and my understanding of the systems, it might mean something else next week than it meant last week. And finally, there's always the economic and policy issues. So this is what we did. We re-platformed the current tool, the SAFNR version 2. We have SAFNR version 3. We put it out for a request for proposal because this is a non-trivial chunk of NERC's budget for this capability. And along the way of using this for 7 years, we had a very long wish list of additional things we wanted to have on this singular pane of glass. We don't have them all today, but we've got some of them. You can see on the background, there's some smudges on there. That's actually live radar. We don't have any wildfires going on January 24th when I took this screenshot, but I can see wildfire footprints. Anybody who has seen the news or lives out west knows the sort of human tragedy and impact that brought to the system in California a few years ago, and the significant policy decisions that are playing out right now involving wildfire liabilities and the impact from the system. Those two right there, that would have been enough to make anybody happy for quite some time. But I'm kind of a demanding customer, I guess. So we've got this, and I am really excited to have Mike Leggett up here, who owns Resilient Grid, that won the RFP that has built this. If you have a question about any of this, throw it to him, because he's the one that actually made this all possible. And really, this is kind of what we started from, is this concept, this idea of, I have this group of users, all the nice company icons over there on the right-hand side. They're providing data. They're also users. And you can see what it is on the left in the blue that we have today, what the actual facilities are doing. I have ACE and frequency data coming in to NERC that I can put in through a different perspective. It's some collaboration tools. Chat, being able to drop pins and sticky notes, John Madden Telestrator over the screen with live data, that's kind of useful. Synchrophaser enabled alerts, any of the things that come out of the North American Synchrophaser Initiative or similar types of things from the commercial sector, the academic sector, whatever. If it's there and it's useful to me, I want to be able to figure out how to pull that in. And I want to dump it all into this shared platform so that we can get to it all in a single place, and I can avoid having 25 tabs open that's going to increase human error, take longer, and be a less repeatable process for me. And then I'm going to dump it out, and that team right there at the bottom, hey, the clicker does work. That's from about 2 years ago, NERC's Bulk Power Situation Awareness Team. Those are the people that are the artists that make this science work. And what we do with it is we get the right information to the right people at the right time every single time. And there's standard ways that we do this. There's some email reports. Sometimes it's picking up a phone call. Sometimes it is hosting a conference call with people. So it varies, and there's a menu. That's not the important part. The important part, really, what comes in is this human optimized information, taking this, all the engineering, and overlaying it into the level of humanity, understanding how humans work individually and as an organization. And that's some of the stuff that Resilient Grid has brought to it. And we have a big laundry list of other things, too, for this. Looking at fuel supply, natural gas. There's a lot of information about there on it now from a static sense. We're getting to the point where if we can get past some of the legalities, we might be able to get dynamic information there, which would give us some really great insight on what the natural gas dispatchable generation is doing in regards to system conditions and what it might look like for the potential disruption if I have a pipeline explosion or equipment failure or, God forbid, a terrorist event or something like that. Cybersecurity. How do we visualize that? It's a great question. Mike and I were talking about that over lunch. I don't know. I think he has some ideas. I know a lot of other people do. Getting that sensitive data and putting it onto this. And finally, Canadian data. Canada and the United States are inseparably electrically interconnected. The electrons don't recognize the fact that there's a political border betwixt us. We are working through the political issues, as we have been for several years, to get the agreements in place to get that extended up into Canada as well, and make sure that the right people can see the right data that they have access to and not accidentally disclose anything or violate any other agreements, and do it all securely. We're going to hold questions till the end, sir. And that's really where we are today. We have a lot of ideas that we can do, the sorts of things that you've heard already from Nicole and from Rick, that I'm sure you all have in your own heads. If we can put it on a pane of glass and help us understand what's going on, that's what we're looking to do. So with that, that's all I've got.